Sunday dinner was pot roast and condescension. She prepared both with the same level of meticulous care. I was carving the meat when our son, Mason, asked why he had to do the dishes if his sister never had to sweep. Innocent stuff. The kind of mini-debates families have when they're all pretending to be normal. I calmly told him, "Because I asked you to, champ. We'll talk about it later." And that's when she couldn't hold back, elbow on the table, swirling her glass of Merlot like it was opening night at the Met, and that little smirk, the one she used on waiters and now, apparently, on me. Let's be honest, he's not a real man. Just like that, tossed out like a lipstick-stained napkin. Our daughter blinked. Our son froze with a green bean halfway to his mouth. Nobody moved. And me? I swallowed the bite I was chewing, wiped the corner of my mouth with a napkin, and said nothing. I didn't argue, didn't flinch, didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. That's what she always wanted. A reaction, a fight, something to validate her role as the poor, misunderstood wife of a man who just doesn't get it. She thought silence was weakness. But in that silence, something shifted. It didn't break. It just unlocked. Later that night, while she was in the living room laughing too loud on speakerphone, probably with Ashley, the one friend she kept because she needed someone slightly more toxic than herself, I went into the garage. I opened the fireproof safe and pulled out a binder wrapped in an old college sweatshirt. Inside were the blueprints. It all started 4 years ago, after the first time she threatened to take everything if I didn't grow a pair. Back then, I thought it was just anger. Now I know it was a forecast. I started mapping out contingencies. Slowly, quietly, I talked to people, old mentors, my parents' estate lawyer, even a retired IRS agent I played golf with once who had this haunting phrase: "The only defense is to no longer be there when the bullets are fired." I took that to heart. Trusts, custodial accounts, property transfers, asset shielding. I never thought I'd use it. Honestly, I hoped I wouldn't have to. But when someone humiliates you in front of your kids, makes a spectacle of your emasculation, and then goes back to sipping her wine like it's just another Tuesday, you stop hoping. You start executing. By midnight, she was asleep, mouth half open, one leg thrown dramatically over the comforter like a soap opera villain fainting after poisoning someone. I stood in the doorway for a moment. She had no idea, no clue, that the less of a man had just completed the first move in a 10-step play that would dismantle her reality. She thought strength was noise, volume, retaliation. But some men don't raise their voice. They just raise the floor beneath your feet until you realize you're standing on a trap door. And by the time you hear the click, it's already too late. Monday morning didn't start with revenge. It started with coffee. She was still upstairs, putting on her usual mask of performative motherhood, yelling at the kids to brush their teeth, asking what they wanted in their lunchboxes, even though she'd already decided. Meanwhile, I pulled out of the driveway like any other day, only I didn't turn toward the office. I turned toward a little cafe just off Main Street, a quiet place with terrible scones and decent privacy. I parked by the side entrance and went in, scanning the booths until I saw him. Michael Graves, old, gray, and sharp as a rusty scalpel. The man had handled my parents' estate like a grandmaster playing chess. He knew the tax code like he'd written it himself. When he retired, I kept his number, just in case. He looked up as I approached and didn't bother with pleasantries. "You look like a man who's found his last straw," he said, sliding a folder across the table. I sat, did an order, and opened the manila envelope. Inside were the alternate documents, the drafts for the custodial entity, the trust amendment orders, everything templated, everything waiting. "I'd like to execute the alternatives we discussed," I said flatly. He didn't blink. "Which ones?" "All of them." No emotion, no bitterness, just surgical precision. If I was going to do this, it wouldn't be out of anger. That's how you lose. I'd seen men destroy themselves trying to fight fire with fire, but I wasn't fighting anymore. I was removing. By 10:27 a.m., the paperwork was notarized, scanned, and sent. The 529 college savings plans, 2 of them set up years ago, were diverted into a separate custodial structure. New grantor, me. New oversight, Michael's firm. New beneficiary terms locked down. She was still listed on the family trust as a contributing partner. That gave her visibility once, not anymore. Now she couldn't even log in without getting a permission denied message. Her email was removed from notifications. Her signing authority was revoked. The kids' future education, something I'd quietly funded with side consulting gigs and contract bonuses while she bragged about her Pilates certification, was now completely out of her reach. I didn't do it to punish her. I did it to protect them. Because a person who can say, "not a real man," in front of her own children won't hesitate to use tuition as a weapon when divorce papers hit the table. She always assumed those college funds were marital property. Why? Because they were under the same roof. Because I didn't correct her. Because I didn't brag about what I was silently building. She never asked where the funds came from. She never contributed. But she saw them as hers because I didn't demand credit. Let her find out now. At 1:12 p.m., I got a confirmation email from the state registrar. The custodial entity was active. At 1:38 p.m., Michael sent a follow-up. "It's in motion. She's firewalled out. You're fully protected." And still no call from her. No idea. That afternoon, back at the house, she was swiping on her phone on the couch, feet up, still in workout leggings, chewing gum like a teenager. "Mason didn't finish his spelling homework," she muttered. "I'm not dealing with it. That's your territory." She didn't even look at me. Not the slightest clue that she no longer had the power to claim the future she took for granted. She kept talking. I kept listening. And silently, I kept checking off the next item on my list. Tomorrow would be bigger, bolder. But today, I'd made sure our kids would get their degrees, even if their mother never saw another dime. The first time she threatened divorce, she did it with a glass of wine in one hand and a Real Housewives marathon on in the background. She didn't even pause the episode. "I swear, if you don't start making real money again, I'm calling my cousin's lawyer." That was 2 years ago. I remember because she was wearing a silk robe she hadn't paid for, standing in a kitchen I remodeled with bonus checks she never acknowledged. And something about the way she said, "my cousin's lawyer," grated on me. Not our lawyer. Not, "we'll talk." Her cousin, who sold real estate to the kind of people who have inheritances for breakfast. That night, I sat in the garage and looked at my old notebooks. They weren't ledgers. Not exactly. More like escape plans. Back then, I never intended to use them. They were hypotheticals, intellectual therapy. But that night, something shifted. I called my Uncle Henry, a former contractor now living in Nevada who had a side business creating real estate holding companies for retirees and paranoid retirees in training. "Build me a structure," I said. "Something quiet. Something that can hold residential assets." He didn't ask questions, just said, "You finally wising up?" Over the next 3 months, I created a second living trust, not a joint one, but an individual trust, airtight, shielded by specific state rules that made it virtually impossible to contest, thanks to the jurisdiction we used and the fact that the original capital came from an inheritance, not marital income. That was the trick. She always assumed everything was ours because I let her think it. That's what peace looks like. You let them decorate the walls while you control the deed. The house was quietly transferred into a holding company under the trust. The mortgage had been paid off the year before, thanks to a consulting contract with a private client who didn't care if I worked in sweatpants. I transferred the title like a surgeon cutting around nerves. The vehicles, paid for in cash, were then registered under an LLC connected to my cousin's now-defunct catering business. He lives in Florida, doesn't even drive anymore. The DMV didn't care. The retirement funds required more finesse. But 2 years ago, I started a solo 401k under my consulting entity. She never knew it existed. It now held more than our shared IRA. Everything I did was slow, intentional, boring. The kind of paperwork that makes people yawn at dinner parties. But while she was sharing memes about how alpha men need to handle real women, I was fortifying walls she didn't know existed. I didn't do it out of hate. I did it because I knew the weather would turn someday. I didn't know when, but I knew the temperature in our home wasn't getting warmer. It wasn't getting cold either. It was something worse. Lukewarm contempt. The slow erosion of respect disguised as passive-aggressive jokes and little smirks in public. The comment at Sunday dinner didn't start the fire. It just made me stop pretending I wasn't already holding the match. Now, as I sat in the same garage, the binder open on the workbench, the documents spread across an old poker table, I went over the structure I'd built. There it was. Her name appeared 0 times, not on the trust, not on the companies, not on the fallback clauses. If I died tomorrow, the kids would be covered by successor entities with oversight from neutral parties I appointed years ago. She would receive nothing but a polite notification and instructions on how to return the keys. I remember looking at one particular form, the deed transfer notice with her signature absent because it was never required, and thinking, she thinks she's smart. But smart isn't secure. Smart makes noise. I build a structure. So when she sat across from me at dinner and mocked my manhood in front of our children, she wasn't talking to a man who needed her validation. She was talking to the architect of her own irrelevance. I put the papers back in the binder, locked the safe, and slept like a man whose war was already won. Because this was no longer about reacting. This was activation. Wednesday afternoon, she was late again. Not that it mattered. Being late was her brand. Overscheduled yoga, overpriced facials, lunches that bled into strategy sessions with that brittle clique of suburban influencers she pretended to hate, but whose approval she desperately needed. She swept into the daycare 10 minutes before closing, sunglasses on, phone in hand, wearing those ridiculous boots she claimed gave her executive energy. The front desk assistant, Kendra, barely 24 but with the polite steel of someone used to dealing with difficult parents, smiled nervously. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Riley. You're not listed as the authorized pickup for today." The words landed like a honey-coated slap. "What?" She laughed, pulling down her sunglasses. "It's me. I'm his mother." Kendra didn't flinch. "Yes, ma'am. But the system was updated this morning. Mr. Riley is now listed as the primary guardian. And per policy, until this is cleared up, I'll need secondary ID and a verbal confirmation from the primary contact." "I am the damn primary contact." "Not anymore," Kendra said softly, looking at her monitor and then away, like she didn't want to be involved in something nuclear. The kids were in the back, probably confused about why Mom was at the front desk, waving her arms and fake smiling with that edge in her voice that always came before something broke. She called me before she even got to her car. I answered on the first ring. "Did you change the daycare records? Are you insane?" "No," I said calmly. "Check your email." Click. She hung up. 2 minutes later, another call. This time, she wasn't shouting. She was hissing. "You filed for a custody modification?" "Correct," I said. "Filed at noon. State timestamp is on the document." "On what grounds?" I paused, let her breathe, and then, "Creating a hostile environment for the children. Documented pattern of parental alienation." Silence. She was breathing through her nose, probably pacing, probably red-faced, staring at the screen as her carefully manufactured world tilted 2 degrees off its axis. "Are you kidding me?" she finally said, but it came out too low, too unsure. "No, and before you ask, I'm not filing for full custody, just a realignment, equal split. I've documented every time you've belittled me in front of them. I have the transcripts from Mason's counselor and that video from the birthday party where you called me a man-child who can't afford to have a spine. You laughed, remember? You recorded me? Didn't have to. You posted it to your story. Ashley tagged you. You thought it was hilarious." She didn't respond. "You turned the kids into an audience," I added. "You forgot they were also witnesses." Then I ended the call. Not rudely, not abruptly, just enough to let her know the conversation was over, on my terms. Back at the daycare, I arrived 5 minutes after she'd left, signed the release, and walked both kids out quietly. Mason asked if Mom was okay. I said, "She's probably just surprised." And she was, but not in the way she expected. She had built her entire identity on the assumption that no matter how hard she pushed, I wouldn't push back, that I was safe, predictable, soft. What she didn't know was that safety can be an illusion, and predictability is a strategy. She thought we were in a marital spat, but this wasn't a spat. This was a campaign, and I had just begun to roll out phase 2. She stormed into her lawyer's office like she was starring in a courtroom drama. Black blazer, oversized sunglasses, a latte she'd forgotten to drink, and all the righteous fury of a woman who believed she still controlled the narrative. "Mark," she barked at the receptionist. "Tell Mark I need to see him now." Mark Labley, her sharp, well-dressed, and totally unprepared divorce attorney, was already pacing his office like someone had pulled up his carpet and found a safe full of snakes underneath. When she barged in without knocking, he didn't even look surprised, just furious. Phone still to his ear, he pointed at the chair opposite his desk and mouthed, "Sit down now." She rolled her eyes, dropped her purse, and slumped into the chair with the theatrical exhaustion of a wronged woman. "Yes, I'm looking at it now," Mark snapped into the phone. "No, the entity is sealed. There's a firewall on the college funds. They're not joint. It's a sole grantor custodial transfer." He turned to her. "You didn't tell me any of this." She blinked. "Tell you what." He ended the call, slammed down the receiver, and flipped open the folder on his desk like she'd personally insulted him. "This," he hissed, turning page after page. "Dual trusts, custodial locks, premarital vehicle title, house ownership transferred to a holding company last year under a Nevada trust." She blinked again. "Wait, what are you talking about? That's our house." "No, it's not anymore. You signed the insurance renewal 6 months ago when it was already under a Shell LLC. It was a courtesy disclosure, not a property agreement." She shook her head, trying to process. "But the college funds." "Reassigned," he cut her off. "Grantor changed. You aren't even listed as a contributor on paper. No access, no standing." "That's illegal." "No," he said, tapping a copy of the statute. "It's airtight. He planned this years ago, piece by piece. Probably started when you first threatened to leave." He pointed a finger at her. "You walked in here like this was going to be a few angry letters and a settlement check. It was just paperwork. We haven't even filed." "You don't understand," she snapped, losing her composure. "He's already filed for a custody modification, and from what I'm seeing, it's going to fly. You gave him the rope. You practically crocheted him the damn noose." She leaned forward, gripping the arms of the chair. "You're supposed to fix this. You're my lawyer. And I'm telling you, we're walking into a financial buzzsaw." He took a breath, paced again, and then, lower. "What did you say to him?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what flipped the switch? What triggered this?" His voice had changed now, not legal, personal, almost afraid. She looked down. Her nails were perfectly manicured. She stared at the glossy finish as if it held the answer. "We had dinner," she mumbled. "I made a joke." "What kind of joke?" "I said he wasn't a real man." Mark stared at her, blinked once. "You mocked your husband in front of your children, and now he is dismantling your position piece by piece." She tried to argue, tried to spin it. "It was just a stupid comment I didn't mean." "It doesn't matter what you meant. What matters is you underestimated him." He stood abruptly. "This is crazy. He would never. He doesn't do this. He's the quiet one. He's the one who folds laundry and apologizes when I slam doors." Mark crossed his arms. "Apparently the quiet one just built a financial labyrinth around you, and now you're on the outside, pounding on the walls." Her face finally cracked. Not tears, not yet. But her hands were shaking as she reached for her phone. She wasn't sure who she was going to call. Her mother, Ashley, anyone who would still play her game. Mark sat back down and started typing. "We can still negotiate," he said without looking up. "But don't expect sympathy from a judge. Not when the paper trail makes you look like the bomb and him the man who finally ran out of reasons not to cut the wire." She didn't answer, because suddenly, for the first time in this whole unraveling, she wasn't angry. She was scared. That night, after pacing her kitchen until her heels left little dents in the hardwood, she did what she always did when control slipped from her grasp. She called her mother, not for comfort but for ammunition. "Mom, he's losing his mind," she began, her voice shaky but sharp at the edges. "He's trying to cut me out of everything. The custody, the house, even the college accounts. He's acting like some cold, robotic psychopath." Her mother, Diane, answered as she always did, dry, calm, half listening from some mahogany office probably lined with old ledgers and family secrets. "What did you say to him?" The question threw her. "Excuse me?" "To make him do all this. What did you say to provoke him?" "I didn't say anything. I mean, I just made one joke at dinner and he took it personally, like always. He's acting insane." There was a pause. Not the understanding kind, but the calculating kind. And you're telling me he's filed for a custody modification, transferred the college funds, and rerouted the property? Yes, he's trying to erase me from our lives like I'm a stranger. Another pause. Then her mother asked a question. Simple, surgical. What did you sign before the wedding? She froze. Mom, what? You heard me. The silence on the line stretched like an exposed nerve. We didn't, she said, her voice suddenly smaller. We never did a prenup. We were. She stopped herself before saying, in love, because even she didn't believe that anymore. It wasn't necessary then. He barely had anything. It was all mine at the start. Her mother became very quiet. She could almost hear the creak of the chair as Diane leaned back, fingers no doubt steepled under her chin like she was contemplating a miscalculated stock portfolio. You never signed a prenuptial agreement, she repeated, as if trying to understand if her daughter had sustained a head injury. We didn't think we needed one. No, Diane said flatly. You didn't think you'd ever be on the losing end. You thought he was harmless. You thought you could run the show and he'd be too grateful or too stupid to fight back. That's not fair, she muttered. Fair, Diane snapped. Let me tell you what's not fair. Watching a man quietly build a fortress of assets around you while you're bragging on social media that he still folds your laundry like a good boy. You thought he was soft. What he was patient. But he can't just take it all. Oh, sweet girl, Diane said with zero sweetness. He didn't take anything. He protected what was already his. And if he structured it right, which it sounds like he did, you're not even in the room anymore. You're across the street looking in through the blinds. A strange sound came from the back of her throat. Not quite a sob, more like her pride choking on itself. I need to fight this, she insisted. Diane didn't answer right away. Then what are you going to fight with? She had no answer. No legal standing on the trust, no claim on the restructured assets, no documented income of her own that wouldn't shrivel under scrutiny. Even the car she drove was leased under his consulting firm, something she'd always mocked as his little side hustle, while posting motivational quotes about how independent women don't need a man. Her mother continued, softer now, but not kind. Never kind. If he's already moved his pre-retirement accounts into a protective structure and you're not on the governance agreements, you'll be lucky if the judge lets you keep your jewelry box. That's not true. Do you even know what structures he used? What state the trust is registered in? Who the appointed successor trustees are? I don't ask. He never exactly said. The silence this time wasn't awkward. It was damning. I suggest you stop complaining and start apologizing. Not performatively, not with tears. Find him, talk, salvage what you can. But he hates me. Probably, Diane said. But hating someone doesn't mean they're not reasonable. It just means they're done pretending. Click. No goodbye. Just the soft hum of a terminated call. She stood there, staring at the wall, suddenly aware of how quiet the house was. The wine rack gleamed mockingly from across the room. The framed photos on the mantel of family vacations and holiday cards now looked like staged lies, little museum pieces from a woman who had no idea the man beside her was building an escape hatch beneath their lives. No prenup, no plan B, no idea what else he had already done. And for the first time in her life, she realized something terrifying. All the power she thought she had was never hers to begin with. She chose a cafe she thought would soften him. A place with overpriced tea, acoustic guitar music looped in the background, and a smell of vanilla that screamed, "We're just two civilized adults having a conversation." A public space where she assumed he would hold himself. Tea small, manageable, contained. She arrived first, poised in a window seat like she was staging an Instagram post, her hair curled just so, makeup calibrated to say concerned but still radiant. She even ordered his favorite herbal tea, as if muscle memory could patch what manipulation had broken. When he walked in, she noticed it instantly. The difference, not just in his posture, firmer, back straighter, but in the fact that he wasn't alone. The man with him looked quiet, older, and carried a leather briefcase he didn't set down. She blinked. Who is this? This is Thomas. He's a certified family mediator. You said you wanted to talk things through like a family. I figured it was best to have someone neutral in the room. She laughed, too loud, too forced. What? You thought I was going to throw a chair at you? No, he said. I thought you'd talk in circles. I don't have time for circles anymore." She went still, her smile faltering. "So this is a legal meeting?" "It's a clear meeting," he answered, and then he sat, calm, unflustered, never once looking at the tea she had ordered for him. Thomas opened a folder and began noting the time, date, and purpose of the meeting. She tried to break through the formality. "Can we just talk, please? I'm still your wife, not a hostile witness." But it didn't work, not on Thomas, and definitely not on him. He waited for the initial formalities to end, and then calmly slid a sealed envelope across the table. "What is this?" "Documentation," he said. She opened it slowly, as if she knew it was going to bite. Inside were printouts, text messages she'd long forgotten, screenshots from her private Instagram where she'd captioned a photo of him sleeping with my third child and a rolling eyes emoji. She kept turning pages, a printout from a group chat with her friends. She'd called him a walking embarrassment wrapped in flannel who cries at Pixar movies but can't hold a real job. Then, a still from a party 2 years ago. Her in a friend's backyard, cocktail in hand, mimicking his voice to a small group as they all laughed. And at the very end, a QR code. "What is this?" "Play it," he said. She scanned it with trembling hands. The video loaded instantly. Her, tipsy at a New Year's party, holding court like she was auditioning for a reality show. "I mean, honestly, he's not even a man. He's a utility. He changes light bulbs and folds laundry. That's his personality." Laughter in the background. She waved her hand dramatically. "And don't even get me started on intimacy in the bedroom. He has all the passion of a thermostat, and even that resets itself." Her face went pale, her lips parted, but no sound came out. "You recorded me," she whispered. He tilted his head, quiet. "You posted it. Your friend Libby tagged you. You deleted it the next morning. But I don't forget when someone laughs while they're carving me up." She dropped the phone on the table, hands shaking now. "You saved all this." "What?" "You taught me to be quiet," he said. "I just learned to listen better." Thomas didn't interrupt, just took notes. She tried to recover. "This is character assassination. This is petty. This is—" "No," he cut her off, his voice still low. "This is a pattern. This is context. This is why I filed for the custody modification. This is why the assets are locked. This is why I am not considering a reconciliation." Finally, the tears came. Whether they were real or just strategic, even she wasn't sure anymore. "I thought we could fix this." "I'm not looking for revenge," he said, not raising his voice. "I'm looking for boundaries." "You're trying to erase me." "No," he said softly now. "You did that. I'm just giving you what you said you wanted." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "You once said, 'I wish you'd just disappear so I wouldn't have to pretend to respect you.' You said it to Ashley, remember?" On speakerphone in our kitchen, kids were upstairs. Her mouth opened and closed. "I don't want to disappear," he added. "I just want peace. And now that I've found it, you're not invited to disturb it anymore." He stood up, nodded once to Thomas, and walked out, leaving her staring at the envelope, the tea, and the version of herself she never thought anyone would hold her accountable for. The mediation room wasn't what she'd expected. She had pictured something grander. Mahogany paneling, an imposing judge in robes, some solemnity to match the war she thought she was about to win. Instead, it looked like a bland conference room at a Marriott. Fluorescent lighting, stale coffee, a table scarred with the ghosts of 100 other dissolved marriages. But she still walked in with her chin high, wearing her tailored blazer-like armor, her lawyer beside her like a sword she planned to wield. He was already sitting there, calm, no tie, just a crisp shirt, and the same quiet eyes that used to fold to her moods like origami. Not anymore. Across the table, his lawyer, a man she didn't recognize, nodded politely, then immediately opened a leather folder and began arranging documents with a kind of surgical boredom, like he'd done this 100 times, like she was just another file to close. Her lawyer, Mark, leaned forward, clearing his throat as if preparing to drop a bomb. "We are requesting fair compensatory alimony, considering the length of the marriage and her standard of living during that time. Furthermore, my client seeks 50% of the net value of the marital home, as well as joint decision-making rights over the children's college funds." He sat back, as if he'd just served a clean ace. His lawyer didn't even blink. He slid a heavy manila folder across the table. "We anticipated that," he said calmly. "In here is a full breakdown of asset origination, transfer records, notarized documents, and trust structuring. You will find that every major asset in question is either premarital or independently structured prior to any filing." Mark opened the folder and stopped talking. Inside was a stack from hell. The house, purchased under a separate entity before the marriage, with documentation showing the mortgage was paid off with funds from a trust established with his late father's inheritance. She had signed a disclosure waiver 2 years into the marriage, witnessed, notarized, the vehicles, technically leased under a corporate LLC, again predating the wedding. The retirement accounts structured under a solo 401k through his consulting firm with a protective clause that prohibited spousal claims, backed by state-specific waivers. Even the damn savings bonds her grandmother had given the kids were in a custodial trust she hadn't been listed on in over a year. "Marital assets?" Mark asked, his voice lower now. "The inventory is on page 7, his lawyer replied. "A few pieces of furniture, appliances, and a joint checking account with less than $2,000 in it. Everything else was structured independently with a clear chain of custody." The mediator looked at her. "Have you reviewed this with your counsel?" This isn't. None of this was mine. We lived in that house." The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and no visible patience, cut in for the first time. "Ma'am, this is not about your feelings. It's about what was documented." "I raised our children in that house," she snapped, her voice rising. "I kept the family running while he documented." The judge repeated more firmly now. "Or did you not?" Mark leaned over, whispering something to her. She shrugged his shoulder away, but her eyes were darting quickly from page to page, line to line. She saw her name in exactly 2 places. Once on the initial trust disclosure waiver, and again on a text message she'd sent saying, "Fine. If you want to handle the boring money stuff, go ahead." That text was now part of an exhibit. The judge cleared her throat. "The division recommendation is as follows," she said. "Petitioner retains all premarital and independently structured assets. Respondent receives the 2017 Lexus, all personal belongings, and no claim on retirement accounts or custodial trusts. Custody will follow the modified plan submitted last week, pending final review." She tried to speak again, mouth open, hands fluttering as if words could float over a pile of evidence and rescue her. The judge held up a hand. "You can request a supplemental hearing if new material arises. Otherwise, I suggest you accept the current terms." "I was his wife," she mumbled, stunned. "I gave him everything." "You gave him mockery," his lawyer said evenly, "and the illusion of control. He gave it back with documentation." The room fell silent. She looked at him, really looked at him, hoping for maybe a flicker of pity, nostalgia, regret. He didn't blink, didn't gloat, just waited for the papers to be signed. And when they were, she walked out with a thin folder, a heavier silence, and the understanding that she had just lost everything she once believed she controlled, all without a single raised voice. The caption was the first move. "Men who use money as a weapon to punish good mothers are everything that is wrong with this world," posted at 7:13 p.m., accompanied by a black and white selfie. No makeup, low light, chin tilted slightly down as if in mourning. The filters were subtle but strategic. Not grief, not rage, innocence. That's what she was going for. She hit post, sat back, and waited for the flood of validation. At first, it came in a rush. Heart emojis. A few automated "you're so strong" comments from women she hadn't spoken to in months. A distant cousin replied with an "Amen, sending you love." It lasted for maybe 8 minutes. Then came the shift. Someone asked, "Didn't you make fun of him at that New Year's party? Wasn't there a video?" Someone else replied with the link. It had resurfaced again. The clip of her at that party, drink in hand, mimicking his voice to a crowd of snickering adults. "Oh, Mason," she drawled, imitating him. "It's like Alexa, but with worse jokes and less testosterone." Laughter. The video cut to her sitting in a lawn chair, saying, "Honestly, the only reason I keep him around is because he does the laundry without being asked." The comment section on that video exploded first, then bled over to her post. Screenshots started raining down. Text messages, comments she'd made on old Facebook threads, quotes pulled from her own captions. You said he was, quote, the resident domestic, and you posted it with a laughing, crying emoji. Didn't you say you forgot he was in the room half the time? Is this the same guy you called a flannel shirt-shaped void? People weren't kind. They weren't curious. They were surgical. The worst came from someone she used to have lunch with, Donna, or maybe Daniele. She couldn't even remember. It was a single comment. You used to say he was harmless, quiet, useless. I guess he was just quiet. Then, nothing. No one came to her defense. Not even Ashley, her most loyal soldier, liked the post. The group chat she created to vent went silent after the first hour. Then someone left. Then another. She sent DMs to 3 friends. One replied, "Hey, I thought you said he was just a stay-at-home dad." That one stung, because that had always been her spin, that he was passive, non-threatening, someone who would always be in the background, folding dish towels and picking up dry cleaning while she built an empire of curated aesthetics and performative self-worth. Now, she was the villain in a story she didn't know had an audience. The post stayed up for another 2 hours. Then she archived it, not deleted, just hidden. That felt safer, like denial in a bathrobe. By morning, her inbox was full. 2 brands had paused their sponsorships. One wanted to reevaluate tone alignment. Her sister hadn't called her back. The kids' school sent a polite but direct message asking if they could have a meeting about the ongoing custody restructuring and social media discourse. And then there was the couriered envelope. No return address. Inside was a single printed screenshot. Her caption, blown up in large font, "Men who use money as a weapon to punish good mothers." Below it, in smaller typed letters, a note. You had the stage. You chose the monologue. No name, no signature. But she knew. The worst part, he hadn't even had to post anything. He hadn't commented, liked, or shared a single thing. He just let her talk. And the more she did, the more the room around her emptied out, until the only voice left echoing in that hollow social media feed was her own. It was almost surreal how the street still smelled of fresh-cut grass and the neighbor's dog still barked at passing bikes, as if the world had no idea her life was being packed into boxes just beyond the hedges. She parked 2 houses down, didn't want to be seen, didn't want the questions. The house, her house, looked exactly the same as the day they first moved in. The same blue shutters, the same swinging bench on the porch, she once joked, made them look like those boring couples who host wine tastings and talk about mulch. Except now there was a moving truck in the driveway. 2 men in matching company polos were loading furniture into the back, but it wasn't the furniture that caught her breath. It was the mailbox. The nameplate had been changed. Where it once read the Rileys in a cursive font she'd insisted on when appearances mattered more than oxygen, it now simply said, Crane Hollow Revocable Living Trust. She blinked, leaning forward in her seat as if her eyes were playing tricks on her, but it was real. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was an asset, one with a name she didn't recognize and no point of entry she could touch. Her fingers hovered over her phone screen. When he answered, his voice was exactly the same as always. Calm, even, not cruel, just final. "Where are the kids?" she asked, trying not to sound as frantic as she felt. "With me at the lake house." "The lake house? Why? Why didn't you tell me? You can request visitations through the mediator. It's already on the schedule." She swallowed hard. "Are you really going through with this?" "I already have." Silence. She looked at the house again. They were carrying out a framed family photo now, one from Christmas 3 years ago. The kids were in matching pajamas. She was holding a mug that said Queen Bee and smiling like she believed it. He spoke again, softly, without malice. "You said I wasn't a real man, that I wasn't enough." Loudly, publicly, over and over again. "So I stopped trying to prove you wrong, and I became something else." She gripped the phone tighter. "You never raised your voice, not once." "No," he said, "I didn't have to." She opened her mouth to argue, to say something, but nothing came out because there was nothing left to win. The car she was driving was leased under a business she couldn't find on paper. The house she once decorated with catalogs and control was now owned by an entity with a name as cold as her own reflection. The children she'd claimed were her entire world on social media now lived under a schedule she didn't design, enforced by a system she couldn't manipulate. She watched as the last of the boxes, labeled Garage Winter Clothes, was pushed into the back of the truck. One of the movers slammed the door with a final clang. And just like that, the door on her former life closed too. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just sat in the car, engine off, hand on the wheel, as if she were still capable of going somewhere. The wind blew softly, brushing dry leaves across the hood. She looked at the mailbox one last time. Crane Hollow Revocable Living Trust. Not her name, not her house, not her story anymore. Only then did it finally hit her. The revenge she thought would come with fire and fury had arrived like a snowfall, silent, absolute, and already done.